It was a chilly fall evening in New York City, the kind that made even the richest rush indoors. Outside the golden glowing windows of the Lafayette Grill, a luxury steakhouse tucked on a quiet street corner in Manhattan, a small girl stood barefoot on the sidewalk. Her coat was tattered, several sizes too big, and her cheeks were flushed red from the cold. She couldn't have been older than 10. But there she stood, pressing her nose gently against the window, watching the people inside laugh over expensive wine and perfectly plated dinners. Inside the restaurant, Mark Ellington sat alone at a corner table, a man so powerful and wealthy that most who passed him wouldn't imagine he ever ate alone. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire, he was known for his sharp mind and even sharper suits. But tonight, something felt hollow. The wine tasted bland. The music was forgettable. The food sat barely touched. He had everything, and yet, nothing that truly mattered. As the waiter returned to ask if he'd like dessert, something outside caught Mark's eye. It wasn't just the sight of the girl, but her eyes. Big, brown, and silently begging. Not for money, but for something far deeper. Then came a gentle tap on the glass. Startled, he looked up. The girl pointed to the chair opposite him and mouthed a few words he couldn't hear. He signaled to the waiter and stood, walking toward the door. She took a half-step back as he approached, clutching a plastic bag that held all her belongings. Her voice was soft, but clear. "Can I eat with you?" she asked. Mark hesitated. Not because he didn't want to say yes, but because he wasn't sure what it would mean. 100 thoughts rushed through his mind. He could be photographed. Judged. Mocked. But when he looked into her eyes again, none of that mattered. "Yes," he said gently. "You can." He led her inside. Heads turned. A homeless girl, ragged and cold, being seated at a table meant for the city's elite. Murmurs followed. A couple even asked to be moved. But Mark ignored it all. The waiter, visibly confused, brought over a second menu. The girl's eyes lit up as she scanned the options. Her fingers trembled as she pointed. "I've never had steak before," she whispered. "You'll have the best one here," Mark said. They talked while they waited. Her name was Lila. She had been living on the streets since her mother passed away 6 months ago from cancer. Her father had left long before that. With no relatives willing to take her in, she'd slipped through the cracks of the foster system. Too scared to go to shelters where others stole or hurt her, she preferred the open city, even if it meant sleeping on benches or inside subway stations. Mark sat, stunned, listening to this tiny voice carry a story that would break any heart. No child should ever know that kind of loneliness. As the food arrived, Lila's eyes widened again. She thanked him more times than he could count. With each bite, it was as if she were tasting hope itself. Mark, watching her eat, felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. But the dinner wasn't the end. As she wiped her mouth with the napkin and began thanking him again, she stood to leave. "I should go before they make me," she said quietly. Mark shook his head. "Wait here," he said. He stepped outside, made a phone call, and returned minutes later with a soft smile. "You're coming with me," he said. "You're not going back out there." Lila froze. "You mean, where?" "To a warm bed. To a safe place. For tonight. And tomorrow. And as long as you want." Tears filled her eyes. No one had said those words to her in months. Maybe years. The next morning, Lila woke up in a penthouse guest room overlooking Central Park. She had clean clothes, her own toothbrush, and a stuffed animal Mark's assistant had brought in. But the real miracle began over the next few weeks. Mark hired a team of social workers. He filed emergency foster care papers. He pulled strings no ordinary man could pull. And by the time December snow blanketed the city, Mark Ellington had become Lila's legal guardian. It wasn't easy. Lila had nightmares. She flinched when voices raised. She'd often sit curled up in corners, holding that same plastic bag from her first night. But slowly, things changed. Mark began leaving work earlier. He helped her with homework, made her laugh at breakfast, read her bedtime stories. He had missed that life, real life, too long ago, lost in deals and deadlines. At a charity event the next spring, Mark told the story of how he met his daughter. There wasn't a dry eye in the ballroom. I went to dinner alone, he said, voice thick with emotion. And I left with something I never expected to find, my heart. The media caught wind, of course. Photos of the billionaire and the little girl he'd adopted were plastered across magazines and online blogs. Some called it a publicity stunt at first. But over time, the world saw the truth. The connection was real. Raw. Unbreakable. Lila began thriving in school. She joined art classes, made friends, even started speaking at youth events for homeless awareness. She had a voice now. A future. A father. One evening, a year to the day after that first meal, they returned to Lafayette Grill. This time, she wore a soft pink dress and shiny shoes. They sat at the same table. Do you remember what I asked you? She smiled. He nodded. I'll never forget. Thanks for saying yes. Mark reached across the table and held her hand. Thank you for asking. And just like that, two lives that couldn't have been more different became one story, of kindness, of risk, and of choosing compassion over comfort. In a world that often turns its back on the forgotten, one man said yes to a little girl with nothing but a question. And in doing so, he found everything. Because sometimes, the smallest voice has the power to heal the loudest silence. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say, is simply, yes.